Okay, Kev, we went over your story, and in the first episode, we went and dove deep on finding your why, finding your purpose, because before you start any sort of physical, mental, personal journey, you've really got to define and figure out what your purpose, what your why is. That episode, highly recommend any of you, if this is the first one you're listening to, go back to the episode before, listen to that one. It's going to give you great context for this one. I want to dive into human capacity and how to like troubleshoot your body. So like we figured it out. We want to make a change, and I'm a working guy or gal, or, like I want to figure out how to troubleshoot what's going on inside my body. What can I do? That sort of thing. So what's human capacity and why is it critical to overall health and health management? Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we ended the last episode talking about human capacity, but I'll just give a quick primer.
Sure.
So again, Quanta, unbelievable job at creating this capacity model, looking at work environments, how people can identify hazards, identify the stuff that can kill you so that they can work safely. And from an athletic standpoint, which is where my background is, in sports medicine, really focuses on how do we build resilience or capacity in the human. And so that's your body can handle more stress with less impact. And so there, so many different things that lead to human capacity. We could, probably touch on quite a few in this conversation, but the big thing is if we're not doing things to help the body repair, build up, prepare for activity, our body's going to start to fall into almost like a breakdown pattern. And so we've all been there at different points when we've pushed hard. A lot of your listeners will work a storm and they're getting like 4 hours of night of sleep on a good night, if that. Yeah. And so then you start to like just feel your body start to get worn down. And if you're not doing things to build it back up again, then we start to, to break down rather than build up. And so human capacity is really a focus on how do we build that resilience so that we can continue to build up rather than break down.
The capacity model is awesome because it gives you a wheel, and it gets you to look at each and every thing that could possibly go wrong.
Yep.
We call it sticky.
Yep.
The shit that can kill you. It's like, let's look at, is there hydraulic systems, air systems, like whatever. It's these different systems. Look at those systems, look at what's within those, and what is the potential for incident to happen. Because with the capacity model, the biggest thing is it's not if, it's when something is going to happen. Like some shit happens.
Yes.
And so how can we build the capacity to fail safely?
Yes.
So I love this, like looking at the human body this way, because like the capacity model is great for these systems that are outside of the human body. Mm-hmm. But like you said, with sports, like try to work the capacity model into running down a football field as a receiver or something like, how do you even look at that? So how do you measure and assess human capacity in the workplace?
Yeah. So measuring human capacity, it's difficult to quantify it. You know what I mean? But I think that there are some things that people can do just on a daily basis to assess their human capacity. And a lot of it is before you start the work, just doing what we call a readiness score. With most sports teams that I've been a part of from sports medicine staff, we would do a readiness score before every single practice, where people would literally, it's pretty subjective, but they just, they'd take like a minute to just take inventory of their body and pay attention to, am I tight here? Am I sore here? Is my head in the game? How did I sleep last night? Do I feel ready to perform? And, those athletes are so in tune with their body. They know when they don't feel great, versus when they feel like they're ready to go all out. And so then on a scale of 0 to 10, they'd, rate their readiness to either perform at that practice or in a game. And it just, what it does is it helps them quantify that in their mind and then focus on the areas that maybe they need to fine tune so that they can be their best when they perform that. So I see even like at a pre-job brief, and again, most people are going to listen to this and they're like, that's never going to happen at a pre-job brief or a tailboard. But in an ideal world, people would take a minute to say, am I ready to perform? Is there something that I need to fine tune? Maybe my shoulder's tight and I need to, grab a lacrosse ball, roll it out for a couple minutes just to make sure that my shoulder's ready to go. Or, it's 100 degrees and I'm dehydrated, and we know that 1% dehydration can cause, a lack of clarity when we're performing work. And, that could be something where a major hazard is missed in when you're performing, a hazard analysis because your head's not in the game. So I do think that some of those concepts from like a readiness score could definitely apply to the work.
I think they could almost be put on the wheel, to be honest, is like, because we look at things like hydraulics, for example. Like, let's look at our hydraulic systems and hydraulics out there. Is there something that could possibly go wrong where we could, have some sort of incident happen, and can we put a barrier in place to protect us against that? Or electricity, for example. So we're all dealing with electricity every day. Can we do something to put barriers in place? Yeah, we can add cover up. We can wear our protective equipment like rubber gloves, or use hot sticks, or, our energized work methods. Like, these are all barriers that, if done right, will protect us against electricity.
Yeah.
Same sort of thing. Like, why not start with an inventory of your body?
Yeah.
It sounds woo-woo, I know, you guys, but it's like legit not. It's like, okay, I'm tight here. I am tight here. I am, like, maybe I could like use a lacrosse ball and roll out, or, roller, and just like roll my legs out or something. Cause like, man, I don't know. We climbed a lot of towers yesterday.
Yeah.
And my legs are freaking tired today and spent, and they're in recovery mode. But guess what? I don't have time to recover.
Yeah.
Because I have to work another day. Guess what? I have to work another 6 days in a row at this.
Yeah.
Like, how am I going to get through this without being injured? Taking a mental inventory just to highlight that. It's a great way to start.
No, for sure. And, we actually created a short like safety moment for, pre-job brief video about that. It's called Take a 360 Walk Around of Your Body. And it's like, everyone has this mindset of, I'm going to do a 360 walk around of my vehicle before I do the work. I'm going to inspect my bucket. I'm going to inspect my tools. But, doing that same thing for your body, it will help you make better choices. And I think if you have, a crew that they're all on the same page and they have that trust in each other, if somebody's not ready to perform the work, I mean, you swap duties, you figure out like, what else do we need to do so that we can ensure we're all going to be safe when we're on this job.
Yeah. We've all had that guy, and speaking to you guys listening, we've all had that guy where we've gone up to them in the morning and been like, we're clipping your wings today. Like, you're not going in the bucket. Your head's not in the game. We've either said that to somebody, or they've come up to us and say, hey, I think you need to clip my wings today. I can't, I had some stuff going on at home. I really am not in the right mindset to be up in the air dealing with live electricity today.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. I got you. We'll swap you out. I'll take your spot.
Yeah.
Get down on the ground, get your head right, spend the day.
Yeah.
But that's a great point. And like, that's it right there. That's the barrier in place.
And that's one of those pieces where, like, if we want to get SIFs down to zero, I think that's like one of the other steps that needs to be a part of this whole work environment, in terms of like making that a normal conversation. Because that's really going to, I think, create the safest environment and allow those hazards to be identified. And, that now we have full capacity.
What are the most common issues to reduce human capacity in physical demanding jobs? So that was just one thing that I had written down, but like, if we're going to hone in on like common issues, like what are the most common ones that you see?
Things that reduce human capacity. I would say a lot of it goes back to recovery. So you work a physically demanding day, and if you go home and you're not doing the things that are going to allow your body to rest, recover, to show up the next day, I mean, it's a lot of things. It's the things we eat. It's the things we drink. I mean, some of my good friends, the working athlete guys, Dylan and Coach P, I mean, they always talk about like the the water you drink, today or tonight is the water that you have first thing in the morning. Like different things like that are going to completely change how your brain functions. We know that 1% of dehydration, impacts the way that your brain functions. We know that even just a slight amount of dehydration changes the way that the muscles are structured in terms of like their resilience. And so you're at a much higher risk of a sprain and strain if you're dehydrated. We know that, if you're eating foods that are creating inflammation in your body, it's going to put you at high risk for an injury, and your muscles aren't going to be able to actually heal and repair. So I would say that whole recovery piece is number one. Sleep, it's huge.
And we'll hone in on this on 3, but I love that we're bringing this up. And like when you talked about dehydration, I've talked about this with the working athlete guys, but just to bring it up again, I don't think we realize how dehydrated we are, and chronically dehydrated, every single person.
Yeah.
This program that I've been on lately, I've had to drink 3 to 5 liters for Canadians. That's a gallon to 2 gallons a day.
That's a lot.
For you Americans, how many of you guys are drinking 2 gallons of water a day, And then even thinking you're at work, so you're probably out in the heat or the weather, or you're sweating, or you're having to drink even more just to stay hydrated.
Yeah.
We live in a chronically dehydrated state. So you say 1% dehydration can cause massive cognitive decline and make you make bad decisions. Basically, put that in layman's terms. You're going to make stupid decisions at work, which could end up costing you your life.
Yeah. And here's the thing, most athletes, when they train, compete, it's maybe 4 hours a day is probably, the time limit.
Yeah.
Most of the people who are listening to this, they're working, anywhere between 10 and 18 hours a day. That is a lot of physical activity. And when you think about how much fuel and water that it takes to actually run your human body efficiently, it's a massive amount. And it's not just water too. It's like the electrolytes. It's all these other things. We're electrical beings. Every muscle contraction, every aspect of our body's physiology is all, sodium, chloride, potassium, all these different vitamins and minerals being required for those processes to take place. And so, what you put in your body is so important. And I just always think if you have, this beautiful F-350 jacked up, beautiful rig, you're not going to put low octane fuel in it. You're gonna put what's best in it so you can get the most out of that. And same with your body. You've got to put that best blend in it for it to have that optimized performance.
Dive a little deeper on the idea of workforce athlete. Again, I talked to the working athlete, same terminology. I always tell Dylan they picked the best name in the world for their company because it's 100% spot on. But a lot of people listening go, "What do you mean I'm an athlete?"
Yeah.
They look at themselves in the mirror. They're like I was. It's I'm not an athlete.
Yeah.
But you're doing a job that is as intense as athletics.
Yeah.
Okay, here's an example. I just watched Chris Bumstead, C-Bum, win. If any of you know who C-Bum is, world champion, 6-time world champion in classic physique bodybuilding, right? Mr. Olympia, 6-time world champion. He talked about his daily routine, right? This is a world champion athlete. His daily routine is do a little cardio, eat some food, rest. Go to the gym, work out, rest.
Yeah.
Might do a little bit more of a workout, rest. So anyway, you take his working out time in there, and he's maybe working out for 3 hours a day.
Yeah.
What are you guys doing out there?
Yeah.
You're getting up at 5 a.m. and you're working your ass off until 6 at night. And then you're probably going home to your kids and working your ass off some more at home. So you're an athlete in all terms. You're not called that in the daily.
Yeah.
Dive a little deeper on that.
Yeah. You laid it out really well. It's like when you're physically doing those type of tasks, you're exerting force, you're having to do precision work. Like all that is the definition of what an athlete does. And it's day in and day out. And there aren't too many rest days, compared to what an athlete does. So, I mean, when I look at this, we call it, industrial athletics. I love the name working athlete. I mean, I think part of that is embracing the fact that that's what you are and realizing that those demands are real. And so it requires, being focused on keeping that machine running well. Otherwise, you get to the end of your career and you're depleted and you're, feeling broken down. It's not the way that should be.
So we talked about showing up on the job site, or even you can do this like when you first wake up in the morning, doing your 360 kind of like walk around your body and figuring out where you're tight and all these sorts of things. Get into like troubleshooting the body a little bit more. Like how does Vimosity look and define and address like troubleshooting your body?
Yeah. No, that's great. Let's talk about, like, we have 3 buckets that we talked about in that first one. So we have like the movement health, we have ergonomics, body positioning, and then we have like the recovery or performance aspect. So if I were to break things down into like bucket number 1 of movement health, I'm going to dive a little bit deep on the science, because I think that this is important, because if you understand some of these concepts, then you can understand the troubleshooting concept a little bit better. So our formula focuses on first rolling the muscles, then what we call diaphragmatic breathing, which is engaging your diaphragm, because really the core of your core comes from properly being able to create pressure within your core. And the number 3 is dynamic movement. So it's taking a joint through a full range of motion versus like a static stretch. So the reason why rolling is so important, in every athlete focuses on rolling. And so I would say the more common way that people prepare their bodies now is actually starting out by rolling the muscle. Because when I roll a muscle, and it sounds like you've done this a lot, you have your trigger point gun and stuff like that. But when we roll out a muscle, like with a foam roller, a handheld massage roller, lacrosse ball, whatever it is, what we're doing is we're increasing the blood flow to the tissue. And then between each layer of muscle, like imagine you're cutting apart a steak, and there's that shiny layer in between the layers of muscle. In between those layers of muscle is what's called fascia. And so when we overuse a muscle, and you've probably felt like a muscle knot, like in the top part of your shoulder or something like that. That muscle knot is usually from an injury or it's from repetitive use. And what the body does is it starts to lay down scar tissue almost like in a patch, that what it does is it helps heal that muscle and repair it, but it also decreases the flexibility. So let's imagine that I strained my hamstring and you feel like this knot in the middle of your hamstring. Every time that you bend down, take a step, what's happened is that, like, let's say it's my left hamstring is physiologically shorter than the right hamstring. And I could stretch it and stretch it and stretch it, but I'm never going to restore that length to the muscle. But if I roll that muscle, what happens is those tissues start to realign into a more symmetrical pattern or a parallel pattern. That allows that muscle to regain its flexibility. But when I roll it as well, I'm getting blood flow, increased oxygen to the tissue. Between each layer of muscle, there's this stuff called interstitial fluid. The way that we sometimes describe it, it's almost like it's like honey. And so it lubricates the muscles and allows muscles to roll over each other. So if you, like, let's say, wake up first thing in the morning and you feel stiff and sore, and then you take 20 steps and you're like, okay, I'm feeling a little bit better. What's happening is that we're warming up that tissue. And so think of it like you're sleeping all night, that interstitial fluid becomes like crystallized honey. And then when you heat it up, the tissue becomes like liquid honey and it can flow better. So that's the same thing with our muscles. And so when we roll out that muscle, like let's say our hamstring, we're increasing the blood flow, increasing the, making that solution less viscous, and we just become more flexible. So like you could take somebody who, like, they try to bend down and touch their toes and they're like 8 inches from the floor, and all they do is roll out their calf muscles. Well, those calf muscles connect to the hamstrings, which connect all the way up. they'll get like 4 inches farther just by rolling out their calf muscles because that whole like line of fascia is being loosened up. And so I'm a huge advocate for let's roll first to get the muscles warmed up, because if I take a cold muscle and just immediately go to a static stretch, I'm not actually stretching out the muscle. I'm probably just pulling at the tendons where it attaches to the bones, creating inflammation. So, I mean, hundreds and hundreds
like injury.
Oh yeah.
Like,
yeah.
For sure.
Oh man. I've seen so many people who like had Achilles tendinopathy. So, you know, you get that pain down by the heel and they're just stretching. And so I'd be like, don't stretch to start out with. Roll out the calf muscle, roll out the arch of the foot.
Warm.
So roll out above and below, and then it alleviates some of that pull where the tendon attaches onto the heel. And it's not that stretching is bad. It's just that we tend to do it out of order. So I always say, if you're going to stretch, roll first or get warmed up and then stretch second. So I still stretch all the time, but I just do it afterwards. So the rolling is part number one. Part number two is like the breathing aspect. And so, you know, we breathe 20,000 times every single day. Other than our heartbeat, it's like the thing that happens the most of anything we do. But for most of us, if you think about it, we work out in front of us. We're, you know, behind a keyboard or behind a steering wheel. We're working out in front of us. So everything in our life pulls things forward. And so we tend to get short in the chest muscles. Our hip flexors get tight, and it starts to actually change the position of our rib cage in breathing. So, you know, you could do this, Ryan, right now. Listeners could do this. You could sit up nice and tall, take a big breath in, and all the way out. And now just try to slouch just a little bit, and now try to take a breath in.
Yeah, it's like short.
And you can't even do it. So
it's tough.
So our rib cage mechanically locks down, just even going from here to here. And most people live like 90% of their life in this position. And so we tend to take these short, shallow breaths, which means we can't fully engage our diaphragm. We can't create pressure that supports our core. We start to breathe through our neck and shoulders. That starts to create, you know, tension up here. And so just getting recentered on our posture and getting our rib cage in the right position and taking full breaths is a great way to do that. And I love it. Like Jocko Willink in the Navy SEALs, they teach box breathing, which is a great technique to, like, you know, engage your core, get your mind right, you know, get everything, you know, prepared for battle. But then you have Brene Brown, who's like talking about box breathing from a stress reduction. So there's like a lot of utility in that. So rolling first, breathing, and then the third piece is moving, and it's more of a dynamic movement. So it's taking a joint through a full range of motion. You and I, between sessions here, just did a couple of those dynamic movements. And what it does is it, you know, joints like to move. When a joint goes through a full range of motion, it starts to lubricate it. It releases stuff called synovial fluid. So I always say motion is lotion. When you take that joint through full range, or you reverse a posture that you've been in for a long time, the body really likes it. So if we're here all day long, we want to open stuff up, right? If we're working with our hips bent forward out in front of us, we want to take a hip through a full range of motion so that we can, you know, change the position, activate different muscles. And so, anyhow, what I've found over the years is that, you know, that formula works really well for, you know, just everyday people, for athletes, and definitely for working athletes as well.
Love that. Go over that 3-step process again.
So rolling, breathing, and moving. And so when you're talking about troubleshooting, I mean, that's one of the skills that I've always found has been the most important thing. Like in my clinical practice, I always told people my goal is not to see you. If I'm not seeing you, that means I'm doing my job. Because what I've done is I've educated you on how your body works and things that you can do to troubleshoot it. And I mean, on this podcast, we've got a bunch of troubleshooters listening. You know what I mean? Your whole profession is troubleshooting. It's figuring out what the problem is and then coming up with a solution. So like if I wake up with like a spot in my upper back that's tight, like right along the shoulder blade, you know, I'm going to probably, you know, get a massage ball or a lacrosse ball. I'm going to roll up, and down in that area to warm up the tissue, to loosen up that area. I'm going to do things that are going to open up my chest. I'm going to take some deep breaths in. Or if my lower back's tight, it's, you know, my lower back is where, you know, the pain might be, but we know that typically it's because the hips are tight, the upper back's tight. So we've got to like loosen up areas above and below. So when people start to learn some of those concepts, I mean, literally you can take care of like 95% of your issues. You just need to know like, okay, what should I apply in this situation?
What are some early warning signs that your body's like nearing it or nearing capacity, I guess?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we all have been there where you've sensed vulnerability. I don't know if you've ever felt that, where it's just like, man, I don't want to take a move. I don't want to cough. I don't want to do anything just because I can tell my body's, potentially going to break. And I always think of it like, a paper clip, you can only bend it back and forth so many times before it just goes. And, usually in those situations, there's a lot going on. There's probably mental stress. There could be stress from a bunch of different things. Cortisol is high. Maybe we're not sleeping and recovering as much. You and I talked about the Whoop, tracking your sleep. I was traveling all last week through Chicago, and my Whoop was just like, I was in the green leading up to it, and then I was like 20%, 22%, 23%. And like by the end of that trip, it was just like, man, I'm not feeling great. Yeah. So, I mean, I went home, I slept 9 hours. Like that never happens, but I'm like, it pulled me out of it. So I think it's understanding those warning signs and having data, I think does help you understand like when you're on the brink. But I say all this and then realize that like for a lot of your listeners, they're like, hey, when a storm's happening, I don't have a choice. Like I've got to work. And so going back to where we started out this conversation with, doing that self-assessment, I think it's really identifying those signs and saying, this is off. Here's where I need to take care of myself, or, maybe I shouldn't be doing this particular job this day and I should tap out and, let someone else do something that, might put me in a spot where, things might break.
That's why I've been such a big proponent of like a wearable. Yeah. I love like the wearable paired with that self-assessment, because that self-assessment is literally just you gathering data. Yeah. Like you're just getting your own metrics over time. Like you're going to notice if you're like doing this over time, you're getting the same things because you're just collecting data. Yeah. Right. And then same with the wearable, like a Whoop or an Aura or something, is just like collecting data. Yeah. But it's not for that one time that you go on storm. It's like that one time on storm was maybe one hurricane a year that you went on, and the rest of the time throughout the year, it's just allowing you to collect data and make small adjustments, small decisions. Like I went to Vegas last year, the same thing, sort of thing. Like you notice reds, like I'd had a whole month of green recoveries, and then I go to Vegas and like typical, you can guess, it's a week of red recoveries. Yeah. Like, are you dead? And I felt like shit after. Yeah. No kidding. We just went to Vegas for a week. We're going to feel like shit at the end. But now, like, what can you do to bring yourself out of that? Yeah. I just like the idea of tracking. Yeah. I've never been like a big tracker. Yeah. Like analyzing data, but it's not in your face. Yeah. It's like literally just like little things that you can start seeing, like sleep, like just, I don't know, if I add an extra hour of sleep, I'm going to probably be a better recovery tomorrow. You can see how much sleep debt you're getting. Yeah. Like, I don't know. You just make all these small decisions.
Well, what I've always found too, and you and I had this conversation leading up to this, that, I mean, you've been on this journey of weight loss, and, you made some comments about how much better you feel. And it's like, I think sometimes people have gone so long feeling a certain way that they don't know what, good or better feels like. And so when you do start to make some changes, you start to, have more data, and it's like, oh, I lost 5 pounds. I'm eating a little bit better, doing some mobility work. My body isn't in pain. Sometimes it's the absence of pain, discomfort, and the way that you've been feeling to open your eyes of like, oh man, actually I could be feeling better, and this could become my new normal. And then you start slowly making those shifts in a better direction. And then when you backslide, which we all do, then you're like, oh, I forgot how much better, like I forgot what that felt like, and how much better I feel when I'm doing these things. And I honestly think it's like the outcomes that reinforce the behaviors, but you have to have a structure. You have to have something to hold you accountable.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, I've never seen someone successful with like going all out and just trying to like change stuff massively in a short period of time. It's like slow and steady. It's like small habits that accumulate that lead to long-term change.
I got a great example. I went to Mount Everest Base Camp. It's always something I wanted to do. I did that trek at 225 pounds. And I was like, man, I thought sore knees was something like, I've always given like, I got bad knees. Yeah. It's just something I'd adopted. Like, okay, I'm going to have this for the rest of my life. Yeah. I played a lot, like very competitive ice hockey when I was younger. And then I climbed poles and towers for 15 years after playing ice hockey for 17 years. Yeah. It's like 30 years of abuse on my knees. Sore knees is something I'm always going to have. Yeah. I go to Everest Base Camp at 225. So since this last April, so it's been like 6 months, I've been on this like weight loss journey. Lost 34 pounds so far, like I was telling you. That, like, I put a rucksack on now and put 35 pounds in that ruck. Yeah. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, this is what I took on my body. Never mind the pack I was wearing on top of that to Everest. And like sore knees, my knee pain literally just like disappeared. Yeah. And it like disappears and it, like, you just don't notice it anymore. Yeah. It's gone. I don't have sore knees anymore. Yeah. I can go up and down hills without the front of my kneecaps feeling like they're going to blow off my body. Yeah. And it's all just because like I changed my eating. I lost a bit of weight. Yeah. My body's now at a level where it's like, it's a weight it's acceptable. Yeah. Like, it's amazing. I don't know. People just don't realize you adopt this mindset. Like, this is just something I got to live with. Yeah. You know?
Man, I used to see that all the time in my practice too. I call it the negative spiral of health. And so, I'll never forget this one woman, Jan. She came in to me and like a year previous, she'd like just was walking through her backyard, stepped in a hole, twisted her knee, and she had like knee pain. She went to medical doctor. He looked at x-ray, everything came back normal, wasn't getting better, then had an MRI, everything showed up normal. And so she adopted this mindset of like, well, this is probably just the way that it's always going to be. So when she had the knee pain, that knee pain limited her from being able to go out and walk as much. So she went from like walking her dog like 5 miles a day to like, just 10 minutes a day. Yeah. Then she started to feel like, not quite as good. And we know that when you're not exercising, it changes the mood. It impacts like even eating habits. So she started, to not have as high quality a diet. Pretty soon she put on 25 pounds over a year. So now she went from like being pretty fit and healthy to 25 pounds heavier, knee pain. This is kind of the way it's always going to be. And so I did an assessment of her knee. Like, there was nothing major going on. It was just like, oh, you strain this muscle is tight. It's pulling your kneecap over. And so that's causing things not to line up. So every time you bend, squat, step, it's creating friction on the underside of your kneecap, and that's creating the pain. So we just worked on some simple things to reduce that pain. And like literally within a week, she's like, man, I can walk now. So she went from like 10 minutes back to like, 30 minutes. And then it went to an hour. And over the course of 6 months, she lost that 25 pounds. Knee wasn't bothering her. Like, just completely changed everything. She was on like a low level antidepressants. She was able to talk to her doctor, get off of that, get off the pre-diabetic medication that she started to go on. So it's just funny how all these things can be connected. And sometimes it's just a loss in mobility, or it's, feeling like, man, this is the way it's always going to be. But for her, it was like, okay, I actually do have a say in this. And it's not going to be true for everyone, but a lot of times it's just simple things, and that can have a profound impact on somebody's overall health.
What are some actionable steps then to improving capacity in daily life? Yeah. Regardless of at work or not.
Yeah. Excuse me. So again, I think it goes back to some of those three buckets that we've talked about. So the movement health piece, I think, is a critical piece. But then going back to body positioning ergonomics, like if you're a working athlete and you're spending, 10 to 14 hours on the job doing physical work. Try to put your body in the best position so that when you're performing those job tasks, you're getting stronger rather than breaking down. I always think, an athlete in the gym, they are more focused on their body positioning and their mechanics when they're lifting that weight rather than how much they're actually lifting. Because, you could lift a small amount of weight, but do it improperly, and it's going to create increased strain to your body. Or you could lift a really heavy weight with good posture and it makes you stronger. And so I always see that, work when done right can actually build you up and make you stronger. And then number 3 goes back to just that, trying to figure out like, what is the formula for you? Like, do you need to focus a little bit on sleep, focus a little bit on nutrition, like hydration, stress reduction? Like, what are those other things that are impacting your recovery? Because all of those aspects, are going to impact human capacity. And it sounds overwhelming. You're like, man, this is 20 things now that I have to think of. But it's interesting when you break it down into just like small choices over the course of your day, and it's grounded in, the bigger why, like we talked about in the last podcast. You're going to start to make small changes just in everyday life. And it really doesn't, it's not that much. It's just like, it just becomes the way that you live your life. You know what I mean? You never think about brushing your teeth as being like something that's arduous. 100%. You know what I mean? You just do it because it's part of your daily routine. And I think if you can make these things part of that daily routine, it becomes way more attainable.
If you connect it to your bigger why, you'll find a way to make it happen. Yeah. And it's again, like choose your hard. Yeah. Everything's hard.
Yeah.
So it might be difficult to work all of this stuff into daily routine, but over time, like you said, it just becomes normal. It's your new norm.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah. You're going to lift stuff all day long anyway. Just adjust your body positioning.
It's one of the things like diving into your stuff and your program that totally want to give you props for is like, it's identifying those things that we as utility workers do on the daily in work, at work, that are those lifting things that we don't think about as like, because it's not like lifting a barbell.
Yeah.
It's like pulling cable.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm pulling cable off this reel.
Yeah.
Like that one video I watched, pulling cable off the reel. Well, there's a dumb way to do that, and there's a good way to do that. Like there's a way that's going to benefit your body, and there's a way that's not going to benefit your body. Explain that a little bit, because like I think that's super huge and important and something valuable.
Yeah. When we went into this space, we saw a huge opportunity. I just have a heart for people who do this type of work. My whole life was spent around people who worked hard with their bodies, and most of them like were completely broken by the time they hit retirement. And so like my heart is really to serve these folks. But one of the first things that I encountered when I started working with utility workers is like, you have to show this group that you get them and that you care about them. And I've learned that right away. Like if I'm not relating it to what they do on a day in, day out basis, it's just, white noise, and we're going to tune it out. So, a big part of the service that we deliver is creating content. And so what we found is that every company does safety moments, before every meeting or, at a pre-job brief. So it's like, how can we create learning moments that just take a minute that continue to compound people's knowledge about the work that they do and how they can best set themselves up for success. And so one of the pieces of content that we deliver is what we call in the field videos. So it's, pictures of linemen, gas workers, generation workers doing those jobs, but not telling people how to do their jobs. It's just, how can you best position your body when you perform that? And again, short bits of content that show, do this, not that kind of style. And, we live in this YouTube culture or even TikTok culture where everybody learns, in short bits of information. And so we found that that's really resonated with people. And it's not just an actor in a warehouse, demonstrating how to do this or that. It's actual line workers. And so it's been a cool way to really reach those people and build that trust.
I think it's super important, honestly. we can't always get our bodies in the right positions. Like I think
100%.
about like so many times when you got two hooks planted on a pole and you got limited ability to like, you got to reach over your back, but is there some way that you can position your legs, turn your leg over your other, and can you like reach out differently where you got your core more supported than like flopping over your back, and just things like that, like so important to pay attention to.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the most important things here, because I would say that a majority of the time with the work that you all do, you can't put your body in ideal positions. So you have to step back and say, given the limitations I have, the checklist is, what is the position of my base? So my, feet, in most instances, it might be you're on one knee, and so that's your base. But what is the position of my base, the position of my trunk, and the position of my shoulders? And am I working in the power zone, meaning keeping it as close to my center of gravity? If you can do that checklist on every job task you do, it takes no time at all.
What was that again?
So base, trunk, and shoulders, and then working in the power zone. Like that checklist, 99% of the time you'll be able to figure out how to problem solve that situation, at least make yourself as strong as you can be.
When you're doing this like 360 walk around, I just want to go back to this for a second, because how do you do this? Like, you're just talking 360 walk. Like, what are you starting with, or what's the process? Like, do you have a process, like a checklist?
Yeah.
Almost like,
yeah.
Where do I start? Top of my head, or what? Like, what am I looking for?
Yeah, totally. That's actually a good point, Ryan, because we probably need to put together like something that's a little bit more of a formulaic checklist. But I always think about, like, number one, do an assessment of your body first, like start at the feet, work your way up, and just take a quick inventory. Do I have discomfort anywhere? Do I feel tight, restricted? So that's a good starting point. Number two is like, how's my head? Am I, ready to perform the work that I'm
mentally
focused on? Yeah, mentally, exactly. Are there things that I'm stressed out about, distracted by, things that, may put me at risk? And then also thinking about, what are some of the external factors? Like, if I'm going to be up in a bucket and I'm not going to be able to go up and down and, get stuff to shield me from the sun, or if I'm going to be dehydrated, like, what do I have with me so that I can ensure that I'm going to actually be able to, go for 3 or 4 hours at a time? Listening to that podcast with Working Athlete, they're talking about that exact scenario. And it's like, if you're an athlete, you're taking in a sports drink, you're taking in some nutrition like every 20 minutes to keep you going, keep your, glucose to your brain, keep those electrolytes going, keep your brain is mostly water and sugar. Like, how are you feeding that? And so, not saying, I probably have 45 more minutes left on this job, I can just gut it out. I mean, those are the moments when I think errors happen, because,
For sure.
we're not performing at peak perspective. So I think it's that 360 checklist is also saying, what are the things that I may need to think about as this job progresses, so I can ensure that I'm ready to go.
I'll give you some examples of what we're doing on the job, and you probably know this already, but like, say, take like a warm environment, like working in Texas with rubber gloves on.
Yep.
Right. And you've probably seen these guys pull rubber gloves off their hands after like, half an hour in the air and just pour water out of that. That's just coming from like the arms.
Yeah.
Never mind like what you're losing on the rest of your body is just the same amount, right? And like, you bring up a good point of like athletes running these marathons, and I've seen, I follow Nick Bear, I follow like a bunch of these guys on social, and they're like at those checkpoints. Like I've, 4 miles in, I've had my first glucose, like my first gel pack, and I took some electrolytes and this and that. Like, linemen don't do that shit.
Yeah.
But they're probably losing more or doing more physical work in a demanding environment than a lot of like runners and athletes do, man. It's crazy. 100%. And not even thinking about like what it's doing. Yeah. I
mean, I do a lot of like long endurance events, and those may take 6 to 12 hours. And it's like, it doesn't matter how good a shape you're in, if you don't have a nutrition plan and a plan to deal with the heat, like, you're toast. And so again, I think we just haven't made that a big part of like the thinking or the preparation for the workforce. And it's definitely an opportunity, I think, where we can advance things.
A lot of these guys, like a lot of you out there, a lot of your nutrition plans are a store stop at the beginning of a day where you grab 3 monsters for the day, 2 tacos from the stand behind the gas station, and like whatever. Like if you even get anything for lunch, like that's usually what you're pounding in the morning. That's not a nutrition plan.
Yeah.
It's like you got to start planning better.
Yeah.
Because like that's the plan. Like that's a lot of them. It's just like dehydrating you more, not providing you with the right nutrition.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge opportunity, and it's part of the culture, and I get that, but it's one of those things too. Again, going back to that example that I gave, you'd never put like crappy gas into your truck, you know what I mean? Sure. Because it's going to impact things. But for our body, it's like everything that we do on a daily basis requires the right vitamins, minerals, and so that extra 10 minutes can make a huge difference in terms of like just preparing to have the right types of foods to help you perform.
Is there anything else that's like the most misunderstood aspects of human capacity in the workplace from what you've seen? So
one thing we haven't talked much about, but I think is a real deal, is pain. Again, I've been spoken to so many linemen over the years, and every time I ask how many of you are you dealing with pain, it's like 80 to 100% of the hands go up. And pain is one of those things that I think a lot of people just deal with. And if you don't have a framework for how to offset it or how to, again, go back to maintaining your muscle and your joint health, it just becomes a way of life. And, but pain mechanically changes the way that the brain functions. It starts to, pull into that reptilian, fight or flight part of the brain. Critical thinking does not happen as well. When we talk about hazard recognition, like when we're in pain, literally we start to get tunnel vision. And so we can't see the things out there. And, a lot of the research on, SIF prevention, hazard recognition shows that on our best day, we only see about 45% of the risks that are out there. And so if we're in pain, like, what is our capacity to actually to see the risks that are out there? And so anyhow, I think that giving people a tool set for how to, recognize when they're in pain, how to troubleshoot, like we just talked about, how to maintain things so you don't get to the point where you're chronically in pain is a really big deal. Because, I mean, how many people, and I know this from like a personal experience from my family, a lot of people go to alcohol, they, the pain is intolerable. They get into the medicine cabinet and their spouse just had a, root canal. And so then they start getting on, codeine or something like that. It's just, there are a lot of things that to me, it's a route that can lead to, not good places.
No. Yeah. It's just a mask, a Band-Aid, whatever you want to call
exactly.
it. So what should somebody do about that then? Like straight to professional help to try to like.
Yeah, I think that there are situations where people have been dealing with it so long. I mean, chronic pain is oftentimes a lot harder to manage than acute pain. Acute pain, it's relatively recent. That's where troubleshooting, doing stuff like that can be really effective. What we teach people is, here's your tool set, here's stuff that you can do. But if that's not solving it, definitely go get some professional help. But again, what my experience has been is that it's a combination of a bunch of different things. If you have a musculoskeletal problem, you're eating garbage, you're dehydrated, you're not sleeping well, you're stressed out, all these things are increasing inflammation in your body. And so you've got a fire going on and then you're just throwing gasoline on the fire. Like it's tough to beat. And I think for most of us, we just are like, I take vitamin I every day, which is ibuprofen. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just like you try to put out the fire rather than dealing with, some of this other stuff that's probably causing that to continue. So it's complex, but I think when people have more knowledge and, if you do that self-assessment and can start to get on top of it, it doesn't get out of control because now you have a way to actually address it before it turns into something bigger.
how can leaders foster an environment that promotes high human capacity in their teams? Like, again, speaking from that perspective of leadership or the employer or employer management to the employee or the dirt level person, boots on the ground type person. What can they do to foster?
Totally. And, you're right, because it does come from culture. It's a culture that says, hey, we really care about you. You're our greatest assets. And, we tell you to inspect your tools, to maintain your tools. Your body's your most important tool out there. And so it's within the workday creating opportunities where people can do those self-assessments, where people have the knowledge and the tools to troubleshoot their body. It's, providing, maybe even some like nutrition and hydration options that are going to be healthier substitutes and making that a part of the culture. It's, doing a readiness score at the start of a pre-job brief just to make sure everyone's fit for duty and ready to go. So, I've seen some tremendous examples of different utilities that just are like, this is the most important thing. And I'll tell you what, their productivity, they're some of the most successful, companies out there. And they're spending a lot of time investing in their people, but their people they're doing amazing stuff. And so I think there's sometimes a myth out there that if you focus on this stuff, it's going to slow you down. But sometimes you have to slow down so you can speed up.
100%. I love that. And on that point, if you're the boots on the ground person, don't sit back and wait for your employer to make the change, because sometimes they have a lot of other things going on, not even of their fault or anything. They just got other focuses. Bring this stuff up to them. Like, you can start implementing this just on your crew. Like, if you're just the leader of a 3-person crew, start providing, hydration packs and start talking about it, start taking time to do assessments and rolling and stretching. Like, start implementing this stuff and be that leader and show your leadership that this stuff's important. Because again, like, if you implement this just on your crew, your crew starts performing better. Your crew starts having 0 injuries. Your crew XXX, all of a sudden your leadership's going to be looking at you going, holy cow, their metrics, because they're paying attention to metrics, their numbers, their production, all of it's better, their attitude, everything. What are you guys doing? They're going to ask you questions.
Totally. And what I've seen is that, like, at the executive level, most of the time they're supportive of this stuff. You know what I mean? They want to see people successful, but really it's the crew leads and the foreman that I think are most influential in this entire 100%. Process. And what I've seen, the people who really like knock it out of the park, they've also have like 25 years under their belt, and they've been like, I've been there, done that. And if I were in your shoes, 5 years out, you're going to be thanking yourself later on down the road if you do these things. And so it's oftentimes those people who are super influential and, speak from experience and say, hey, this is going to become a priority. And you're exactly right. Like, the numbers do not lie. Like, I can think of many examples where these different crews really embrace this and they're the top performers. And it's like, it speaks volumes for sure. Give me one takeaway from this episode then. If there's one, maybe there's more, feel free. Simple daily habit, the biggest one. Like, if you're going to start changing something now, do this, even if something we talked about. Yeah. So I would say one thing that would probably be the best starting point is, until you step back to recognize what you need to work on, you're going to have no idea. And so I think doing that readiness score, whether it's with your crew or it's you doing it personally, until you take the moment to like step back and just analyze stuff, you won't even know where to start. We've talked about, 20 different things that you can do. But when you start to become more in tune with your body and you start to have data, you start to, just become more aware, then you can start to implement some of those troubleshooting, things that we talked about, the recovery aspects. So I think a lot of it is just awareness, and it's taking the time, because we're all going a million miles an hour. Until you stop, it's just day in, day out. You just keep doing the same thing.
Love it. Okay. Episode 1, we talked about finding your why and your purpose, which is really the mindset that's going to drive wanting to make change in yourself.
Yeah.
Episode 2, this episode, we talked about human performance and troubleshooting these aches, pains, things. Set up episode 3, which of this series, which will be the final episode. We're going to talk about implementation, food, nutrition, different things, recovery, massively talk about recovery. Anything you want to say about that before we jump into that?
Yeah, I think that this episode really touched on stuff at a pretty high level, but again, recovery is absolutely the most important aspect of a long-term career, and just, again, being able to show up day in and day out at your best. So yeah, I'm excited to have that conversation.
All right, guys, tune in. Episode 3 coming at you.
Thanks a lot, Ryan.
I hope you guys got some value out of that episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I just want to draw your awareness to a couple of other things. So we make these podcasts, yes, but it's not the only thing that we put out as far as content. Our social medias are full of valuable cuts from the podcast itself, as well as just a bunch of other educational stuff and entertainment. So go follow us at Powerline Podcast on all social media platforms. And then also YouTube. I don't think that a lot of you are aware of this, but we don't just load these podcasts onto YouTube. We also make vlogs, which are super educational, entertaining, great place to direct people to learn about the industry, learn about the trade, or just learn about what's going on within either Quanta or the Powerline industry in general. So hit up our YouTube channel. Again, it's at Powerline Podcast. You can catch those vlogs on there. We also load a bunch of other extra content in video form. We try to up the quality every time we do this. We try to up that quality. So hit up the YouTube channel and make sure you're subbed to all those platforms. Appreciate you guys. Hope to see you again soon. We'll see you again soon. Peace.